Hello out there. Hey, Pablo.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. How you doing?
Catching up on some reading, I see.
Yeah, a little light reading.
Good. It's important, especially for you.
Okay.
You got a new sweater. It's nice. It's cozy. It's a
Thank you.
reading sweater. Nice reading sweater.
It's good reading weather too.
What a beautiful day. It's such a
Mhm.
beautiful day today. Hello, everybody. So this is our next installment of our podcast. Today, we're actually talking about the phenomenon of being alone. So this is a quick little intro for all of you because we're actually going to be jumping into a pre-recorded conversation that Pablo and I had a little while ago, and we're going to be joining it partway through that conversation. So hope you enjoy it, and we will see you for the next one. Better get back to your reading, Pablo.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here. More understanding of like why we're doing things the way we are.
Okay.
You know, like for me, like being alone as a kid, it's like I learned at a very young age that I did a lot of stuff alone. I mean, that was not by choice, unfortunately. Like I noticed, like in reflecting on my childhood, that I didn't have a lot of supervision a lot of the time. So I had quite a bit of freedom, more freedom than I probably should have had at a really young age. And I quickly adapted that idea of like being left out, being forgotten, not being important, the things that we're talking about now in that exchange that we had. It's like I got left out and missed and intentionally shut out in many different ways, whether it was like being locked in my room, being forgotten in a parking lot, having my older siblings like playing with each other, but not with me, not being included. And so like I adapted where that being alone was actually like my preferred way of being. So I could actually feel some control and choose what I was doing, to be able to have some choice and also feel more safety in being alone, to be away from those situations that didn't feel safe for me. So it was invisibility. It's like I learned how to be invisible really, really well. So well that it became my superpower for most of my life up until not too long ago, where I really like felt wholeheartedly that I could be invisible at any time to anybody because I'd learned all the ways to do it.
Wow.
But I'm I also want to hear from you because I'm going to guess that there's going to be some overlap here for sure about some of our experiences. And for
I
you
I
as a
want to get
kid,
back to you. I want to get back to you and what it's like now for you to be seen or to allow yourself to be seen. But yeah, for sure there's overlap, and there was times growing up where I felt so alone within my own family. I couldn't relate to anybody. They couldn't relate to me. Um, and sometimes I didn't want to relate to them because I was unhappy with their conduct. Uh, and then there was times that they were unhappy with mine. It's a lot of judgment. Um, and I never wanted to be alone, but I found myself alone quite a bit. Um, to the point where,
you
like, if I went to the
you want
store, sorry, go ahead.
you wanted to be with others as a kid.
Always,
You felt
always.
that?
But it didn't always feel safe or possible. So I just ended up alone. Like, even if I didn't want to be alone, the people that were around to be with were not the people that you'd want to. They were not treating you well, or they were not happy with you, and so like you just were alone. Um,
Mm.
but even with friends and stuff, like I wasn't sure how to make long term connections with people. I didn't know that how to do that. I didn't know how to open myself up to be vulnerable enough to make those types of connections. I think I, not consciously but subconsciously, doubted that I had enough value within me to matter to people. So what's the point on trying? So I had friends, but it was like very shallow relationships of like, what video games are we playing in this moment? And Like because I wasn't able to go any deeper than that. I didn't want to talk about anything deeper. But anyways, just being physically alone, like if I went to the store, I wanted somebody to go with me. I just didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to do anything alone. I felt embarrassed to be alone.
Embarrassed to be alone.
Embarrassed to be alone. Even saying that right now I feel that's a heavy thing to say, and I feel shame around it. But yeah, that's how I felt as a kid.
Wow. Such different experiences. Like, I remember as a kid, it's like I loved the idea of playing like games with like the neighborhood kids, where like everyone was like out in the street playing some, you know, large group game. And I got a lot out.
Did you ever play Manhunt?
Yeah,
I played Manhunt.
that scared me, man. But I mean, like, even by that time, it's like I was one of the youngest kids in that group playing that game, and I didn't clearly understand all the rules other than don't be found. Like, don't be found. And I'm like, well, that's my superpower, man. I can disappear. So I remember one game. It's like in my neighborhood, we had this really tall oak tree at the corner of the cemetery that was next to my house that I played in all the time, and so I knew like my way through the cemetery, like all the little bushes and things that I could hide and observe people. But there was this large oak tree at the corner, and so when the game Manhunt began, it's like kids just like scatter, right? And I went right to that oak tree, and I was a little kid. I climbed up that oak tree, and I climbed up almost to the top because I kept looking down and seeing the ground at the bottom of the tree, thinking anybody who comes to the bottom of the tree just has to look up. And if I can see any of that grass down there, they'll see me. So I kept climbing higher and higher, thinking there's going to be enough branches overlapping that I won't be seen up in the tree. And I was up there so close to the top that I was actually feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get down from here. Like I'm really high up off the ground. And I sat in that tree for way too long. Like I was so afraid of being caught. I was so afraid of being caught that I stayed in that tree like long after the game was over. And somebody was like out in the neighborhood, like I might have been a parent was out in the neighborhood, like calling out for me, like trying to find me because nobody knew where I'd been. And it's like I was just up there. It wasn't about winning the game at that point. It's like I was so terrified of getting caught, and that reaffirmed in me like the reasons why I had to be invisible, you know, was to stay safe and not get caught and punished for something, you know. So man, but yeah, it really felt like a superpower, and into my teens, into my young adult life, and just realizing like the ways that we can be undetected and not seen, and how devastating that can be to who we are as people. And coming to this realization that it's like the thing that I saw as my superpower, it's like it's not, I don't feel it's my superpower anymore. I know the ways, but it's not how I want it to be anymore.
Okay, let's just say that it's not about, for me, like I still envy your power to be able to disappear. Like I still think that's a cool thing to be able to do. But to be able to do it, to choose to do it, is different than feeling like you have to do it.
Yes.
So yeah. I wouldn't want you to lose that superpower. I hope that you can gain another set of powers that, you know, of visibility and being able to be present and feel like you matter and connected. Yeah.
Well, I mean, something that has been like shared with me, and something that I'm understanding now from people who I care about and who are involved in my life have been letting me know. It's like when you're invisible, you're not invisible. It's like we notice that you're not there. We're noticing that you're somewhere else. We're noticing these things. So it's not that you're invisible, it's that you're away from us. And hearing that was like, you know, when you talk about shame earlier, it's like when I heard that, like one of the first times where I could actually take it in. I could actually, like, I wanted to take it in. I wanted to feel that. And me feeling these intense emotions of like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. Like they're totally onto me. They see what I'm doing. And why would I do this? Why would I do this to myself? And
what an interpretation that you're a horrible person. Hey, we want more of you. Oh my God, I'm a horrible person.
Yeah, but like to get that kind of information from people, like that was new for me. It's like my experience was usually like if I made myself invisible, it's like the relationship was over, moved on, and it wasn't too hard to do because I moved so many times in my life and have had so many jobs and been in so many places where it just felt like that was routine for me. So to have somebody say like I can feel you going away somewhere and I want you to come back, like that was pretty scary. The feeling of loneliness in that moment of like, what if I can't? What if I don't? Then it's on me. It's not on the conditions. It's not on these other things. Like it felt like it was on me, that it was my fault if I couldn't come back from that. So now it's like I still have that superpower. It's like I know the ways that I can do that. I know that I can be invisible, which is also a great support, knowing that if I feel unsafe, if something feels like too much for me, that I can do that thing. It's like now I actually have a desire to not be invisible. I actually want to be seen and heard, because getting that kind of messages from friends and people who I care about, um, like I was seen, I was heard in that moment. And in that moment of shame, I'm being seen and heard and being told like, yeah, you matter quite a bit and we need you here. Like, come on back.
Is part of this new understanding or wanting to be seen, is it because that you now believe or feel like you have something to offer people? Not in terms of like support or help or anything like that, just in terms of like that you yourself are a valuable person, that a conversation with you might have value to people.
I think I think I've I think I've always felt value in what I had to share to people. I've always been someone to like observe, to really like take in what's going on around me. I've always felt that I had something of value to share with people. It's that what I'm understanding now is that like I am part of that package. It's not just the knowledge I've gained. It's not the skills. It's not my superpowers that people want to learn from me. Like I'm not a convenience store that someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I want that piece of you," and I'm like, "Here it is," and off, and I remain, and that thing goes.
Has that been the case in your past, where you give people pieces and not yourself?
Yeah, like I have a, lots and lots of experiences with people where it's either short-term relationships or it's been a brief kind of passing, but it's also how I felt safe as well. It's like I know things, so I have value in this circle, in this social setting, or in this job. Like as long as I can prove to you that I've got information and I know things and I have answers, I'll have value to you, because I didn't believe that if I didn't have those things to offer, that I would still be an asset to the relationship, that I would actually have value in that relationship, which was scary because I had a hard time valuing myself. So how could somebody else value me? Um, and I know that has a lot to do with the fact that I was alone a lot as a kid. I wasn't getting I wasn't getting information from family members and people in my neighborhood and in my experiences saying, I'm noticing you in a positive way. That wasn't like, I see you, get the fuck out of here, or stuff like that, which was just like running and hiding and afraid. Um, so now it's like, I'm realizing that all of that knowledge and stuff that I've gained and have to offer, it's like, that's because of me. It's because of me that I have that information and knowledge to share, which means I'm sharing myself with others. And so I do feel like I have a lot more value now because,
You always did.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
and I know that I know things. Like it can't be disputed any longer. There was a time when I could dispute, like, oh well, I just know this because of this thing, and now it's like, no, I can't bullshit myself that way anymore. It's like I know things because of the experiences I've had and the things that I've needed to survive or support.
Okay, so does that mean that that's universally true for everybody, including our students, including myself, that I know things because of my experiences that are valuable, that make me who I am, and therefore I have value regardless of anything else?
Yeah. Yes. And Yes, and this is so much at the heart of what you and I are like doing with this thing in our relationship with each other, and bringing that relationship into this class and how we're trying to develop it. And it's that's the thing, it's that we all have so much experience, and in all of that experience, like, we were part of all of those experiences, and we have so much information and knowledge, and that we are part of that. Again, that we're not the experiences aren't things that are outside of ourselves. They're not things that are floating around our orbit. Like, they're in us. We are our experiences.
Yes. They inform the way we see the world, the way we experience things and see ourselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And through talking about these things and relating to one another and having discussions about stuff, like me telling you something that I think is a little bit like superficial in details of just saying, like, you know, I didn't have a lot of supervision. I experienced like a lot of neglect. I spent a lot of time alone. And a lot of that was super fun for me because I learned to enjoy it, because then it was in my control. But I mean, hearing you react to that hearing you feeling from me, it's like in that moment, I'm just like, oh yeah, right. Like, this is having an impact. It's like my story is actually like, I'm being heard and understood, and you're not feeling, I don't think you're feeling sorry for the story. You're feeling something for me.
I think I'm actually feeling you, like I'm like experiencing you and your experience, which is, it's a gift, right? As even in the painfulness of it,
Mm-hmm.
or in the excitement that you feel of being alone and stuff, like it's all of it. And so if we
And
weren't having
it's
this
and it,
conversation, I wouldn't have the opportunity.
yeah, and it's scary saying these things right now, like telling these stories, right? Like, we have these questions to ourselves. It's like, how much information is too much? How much am I willing to share? And the more we talk about things, it's like we can trust ourselves in knowing, we know when we're saying enough. We know, we get signals from ourselves if we can tune in a little bit more to know. It's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit sweaty right now, like telling you this story, because part of me is like, oh my God, like am I going to be judged for the way I behaved or the things that I did? Because that is so much of what I learned. But taking these little risks and just like staying on the surface, or at least what I think is staying on the surface of a story, and hearing that's impacting you, and you actually wanting to hear more, and not saying, oh God, that sounds messy and yucky. Like, please, can we change the subject? Like, that's the kind of thing that have expected from people. That my stories are too much, too messy, too scary, too unbelievable, that I
Let's
can't.
just, that can be true for some people, but it doesn't mean that it's a reflection of you or your story. Your story might be too much for some people in where they're at in their lives, but that doesn't mean that you're too much as a person. That's one of the understandings that I've come to, is that, like, yes, I may be too much for some people under some circumstances, but that doesn't mean that I am too much generally or as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And in us talking about these things, it's like, the more we talk, and the more we have these like nervous, scary, unsure moments with each other, I find, at least for me, like, when I get sweaty telling a story, it's like what I would usually read as, oh, this is getting too intimate and personal. Like, I should probably back away, because that makes people uncomfortable. It's like, it's having the opposite effect on me and on you as well, in that we're curious. We keep getting more curious and wanting to know more about one another, because we want to understand how to communicate and relate in a more intimate and personal way.
And also that your freedom to speak is also then my freedom to speak. Like, if you have the capacity to talk about your experiences, and to sit in them and feel them, and you're sharing that with me, then that's an offering then to me to be able to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you were shut down and closed off and still feeling uptight, if that's the environment that we had created with one another, that's also the environment that I'm in. So I'm glad that we've created an environment together to be able to share. I'm
And
grateful.
for this class too. Also, it's like, how could we possibly create a course like this and ask students to be more willing to share themselves with one another and with us if we weren't willing to do the thing ourselves, and to talk about how these things impact us as well, to let them know it's like we're all human beings in these spaces and we're all experiencing these things. And if we can hear each other a little bit more, that it can absolutely be felt as a support. And difference as well, like even in these conversations, right? Like having such incredibly different experiences as children. And I didn't feel like I couldn't be understood because you always wanted somebody with you. It's like, I can also totally relate to that feeling of not wanting to be alone. It's like how we adapt and how we cope.
How we make things right, force them to make sense when they don't. Yeah. I'm just thinking now about, like, I think we have in some ways created that environment in the class. Like when people have shared in class, it's so powerful, and I feel so enlightened by their knowledge of the world. I feel successful in that way. Like, and I think it happens more in the reflections that we've been reading, is this willingness and openness. And that makes sense. It's more intimate and people feel like it's more contained, but like we've read some powerful insights about the world and about people, beautiful things, troubling things, difficult things, but the willingness to share it is amazing. I'm wondering if there's ways we can engage more in the bigger class discussions, in that same spirit. But I understand there's also limitations. It's harder with a larger group of people to be that intimate.
Yeah. It's I think it's definitely a challenge as well. It's like to come into, this is one of many classes that students are potentially in as well, right? Like I can only imagine how it feels to be shifting from one environment to another as a student, and adapting again, like as we talk about adaptations in our lives. It's like trying to figure out, it's like, okay, this is the class I'm in now. It's like, what are the expectations and how much of myself do I need to bring into this space? How much can I bring into this space? Like,
how much should I? Yeah, all that stuff.
It's not an easy thing to do.
No. If we had years together, I'm certain we'd get there, almost to a person. I think we could reach deeper connections with people, but we definitely don't have that luxury of time.
We don't have the luxury of time, which is why we are excited every moment that we have in the classrooms, folks, and discussion.
And why we offer the smaller discussion at the end of class, which we want to again invite anybody who wants to participate, who might feel a little less hesitant in a smaller group or feel more comfortable in a smaller group, but wants to hear a little more intimately the things that people talk about in that smaller group. Please come and join us after class.
And I think also, like, with making these podcasts as well and having them, it's like we're having these conversations and then we're sharing them with the class, and we're sharing them with the class as a resource and looking to have discussion about what we talked about and what's coming up for folks as they listen to us or watched us. And, it's like wanting there to be some more discussion about it. It's also because we also are wanting people to be more curious about us too, and the relationships that we have with them as well. It's not us just doing this thing is to try and like model this way of teaching or try and do this thing. It's like we're also experiencing these feelings of disconnection and distance from one another, and we're doing the best that we can as well to try and like find a way through this.
Or sometimes choosing not to do the best that we can, because we have to take time for ourselves to not be the best that we can,
Yeah.
It's all of it is a challenge, and we have to like measure it out every second or every step of the way. Like, how much can I give in this moment? How much do I need to reserve for myself in terms of my privacy or my energy? And I'm sure students are experiencing that too. And so again, like with kindness, I want to invite people to join us more fully in class, with the understanding that some people are not in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because of privacy, maybe that's one of the issues that they're experiencing, is that they're not actually alone, but also maybe they really need to be alone and they want to be alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we said in one of our first, maybe in the first podcast, I think it was in the first podcast where we said that we're willing to do this thing and make mistakes and stumble and have that be part of that as well. Because I think a really important piece of this for me as well is the pressure I can feel on myself to do everything the right way and to have that perfectionist kind of approach to things. And
You do have that. You have that problem.
I do have that problem. And I want to be able to also be the support to students as well who might be relating to that experience too, of feeling that perfectionist. That
And I want to relate.
Right.
I want to reach out to those students who feel the need to half-ass it and don't want to do it properly. And I'm there for that. I'm there for that spirit, because that's more aligned with me.
You are so helpful with that, though. Like, honestly, like
You too.
are so helpful with that.
Let's say we balance each other out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know that I notice my perfectionism coming up when you start focusing on little details. And I'm like, whoa, man, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, this is about us. It's not about all those other things, you know? So it's true. It's like sometimes we see ourselves better when we see ourselves through somebody else.
And when you start half-assing it, I get shocked and appalled. And I'm like, how dare you? Like, we need
You get delighted. You get delighted.
Sometimes, if it lets me off the hook of something, for sure.
Final question before we wrap up our podcast.
Okay.
Is there any piece of media that you can think of from your childhood that really connects you to the concept of being alone?
You really caught me off guard with this one.
Or it was something that it was like, kind of that feeling as a kid where it's like, you know, other kids would make fun of me if they knew that I really liked this thing. Like something that was like so specific to you that you felt like you could only enjoy it when you were alone, or really enjoyed it when you were alone.
I still have those things.
Yeah, think about it. I bet you've got.
I'm sure I have things. Go ahead.
I bet you'll think of a book, because I'm thinking of a book.
Okay, you know what? I got a book. As soon as you mentioned that, I have a book. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Watch. You're gonna steal mine. Do you want to say what yours is first?
Peter Pan and Wendy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and crying at the end, because I don't know if everyone knows that story. I'm sure a lot of people do, but at the end, the Lost Boys.
Like Peter Pan the book, or the Lost Boys?
The book.
Story?
The book. Yeah, yeah. And so the Lost Boys at the end of, I think it's called Peter Pan and Wendy, is like the original Peter Pan book.
I'm sure you'll find a little image and pop it up on the screen.
I'll pop it up there. By J.M. Barrie, maybe. I think. Okay. If I recall. And yeah, I took it out from the library. I was like in elementary school. I don't remember what grade. Probably too old to be indulging in this type of thing. But like, the Lost Boys forgot how to fly at the end. They could fly. They had this amazing power of like being young and youthful and not worrying about the world, in the real world. And maybe I was also experiencing that. Actually, I was. It was that after the death of a family member. And so it's about the loss of innocence, God damn it, or the loss of like hopefulness or growing up and the realities of being an adult. They forgot how to fly, and I just started crying. I couldn't stop crying, thinking about how these boys who had been so full of life were now becoming adults and in losing that childish way, that wonderful childish way, that they were going to be now adults. And I didn't want to be an adult, and I didn't like the adult world, and it was scary, and
just regular people without any magic.
Without magic, yeah, living your life without the possibility of magic. That feels lonely.
Yeah. Oh.
Devastating.
Did you reread the book? Is it something that you like love to feel the tenderness and sadness in that, or?
I can't get back to it.
Yes.
So I've tried to do that as an adult, and I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it for me anymore. I've lost the magic to be able to even connect to that. Maybe now, and maybe in this moment, maybe I could go back this afternoon and read the last chapter of Peter Pan and
Mm.
Wendy. I wonder what that experience would be like.
Wow. Oh,
Thanks for bringing that shit up.
all your little tears rolling down into your 10-year-old beard.
Yeah,
Sad little dude.
yeah, I had the same. Yeah, good one. Okay, now that we're beyond my pain, that we're laughing at me as a 10-year-old. Okay, go ahead. What was your thing?
Uh, Mine was a book. So part of my like being alone as a kid, it's like I just love to like be off in the woods by myself and building stuff, like digging holes and finding old like bottles and caps and like all this junk. Find junk in the woods. But I loved the idea of building stuff because it was always the idea that I was going to like build this tree house. I was going to build a raft that I was going to like be able to like travel on and have a fort in the trees and stuff. So I could live there if I wanted to, but I had an escape, right? And nobody else would know about it. Like I was always in the woods. Like I would steal stuff from my house, like a hammer and nails and like odd pieces of wood and tools and stuff, and take it with me for during the day and go out into the woods and like start. So I discovered this book at a really young age. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and it was called My Side of the Mountain. It's just a story of this young kid who decides to run away from home, and he goes up into the Adirondacks. Can't remember now. I'm gonna have to find the book myself. But there's wherever he lives, this family, it's very close to this mountain range. But he even says to his parents, like, I'm going to go up the mountain and I'm going to live up there. And his parents say, like, okay. They escort him, they follow him to make sure that he's like, okay. Of course, this is completely fantastical, right? But my kid brain was just like, holy shit, you can actually do this. Like, those are the best parents ever. Those parents, like,
That's supportive parents. Yeah.
That is supportive. It's like, okay, we got you to the like mountain pass. Now off you go and be well, and we'll come and check on you in like 3 to 6 months or something. It's just like, this is amazing. You know, it's like my life was like Canadian Tire catalog, like circling all the survival things I needed. So I read this book, and this kid like goes up into this mountain, and he learns how to live off the land and take care of himself. He hollows out an old tree, and that becomes like he lives in there, and he builds like a chimney. He like hunts, learns how to like smoke the meat and stuff, and all the berries. And even in the book are all these pictures of all the things that he discovers and builds. It was my first try at making a shelter that didn't work. You know, he's up there for like a couple of years. His parents come and visit him occasionally, or he'll come down to visit them to get some supplies. But it's like this kid is like doing his thing up in the mountain. It's like, that was amazing to me. And
love him. I love him already.
That was my goal. And so I read this book like a manual, like, this is what I need to learn how to do.
This is how you live your life.
Because this is like, who cares that I'm not living anywhere near a mountain range, let alone like a hill, you know? Like I was in south end of Ottawa, where there's woods and stuff, but like that had such an impact on me. It's like that really kicked off my desire to like learn how to build, learn how to do all these things that I do now with such enjoyment and pleasure. And it's not about being alone. It's just I learned some really incredible skills.
Oh yeah, and a little bit behind the scenes for people is that you're a very handyman, that you know how to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
They may not know that, and by looking at you, they could never tell that you're a handyman. But you are.
Some people notice my tattoo and are curious as to what that's about, and it certainly got something to do with the skills that I've learned. But yeah,
should be a pencil. Should be
Encyclopedia Britannica or something, right, like tattooed on my arm. But yeah, all these great skills that I learned from that book, and it's like, learn how to like survive, and you'll always be okay. And that was like just so incredible to me. But cool. Now I love using those skills. Like I love teaching. And this is the great thing. It's not about being alone anymore. It's like all these things that I learned on my own and taught myself how to do these things. It's like, that's great that I did that. But I also recognize that, you know, some people love to learn on their own, but I also love to be able to teach and give some support if people are like curious to know if there's another way or to get help with stuff, like it's such a pleasure. So, so there we are. We're all done.
Okay.
All alone. All right. Looks like
Okay.
we're done. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo.
I
Take care.
appreciated that. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
So formal.
I have to wrap this up in a formal way. Have a good one out there. What's like a good sign off that broadcasters use? Good night and good luck. I just want to end it right now.
Oh wait. Stay classy, San Diego.
Your favorite broadcaster, Ron Burgundy. Okay. Talk soon. Bye-bye.